Hi everybody, this is Oksana, and today I have this really fun little tutorial for you. I'm really enjoying this design, and it actually is inspired by an old tutorial back from 2018, and it's called the Scarab Pendant. That's what I called it back then, if you want to find the old tutorial that I'm referring to. But for that one, I did a little bit of either weaving or just connecting with half round wire, and I thought, well, how can I make that design easier? And first of all, I can use only round wire because I know some of you guys don't have access to square or half round wire. You could do this with square as well, by the way, but I wanted to use round, and I also wanted to avoid any sort of weaving using half round wire to make a connection. I wanted to just do it with one type of wire. So this is 20 gauge round wire, and that is used throughout this design. There's no other types of wire used. And so this is a really fun pendant. I want to say it's beginner friendly, just like that other design was, but it does take a little bit agility in your fingers, just trying to hold the stone together as you're maneuvering everything, because it can be quite slippery and it can be kind of slipping all around before we secure it in place. So I could see it getting a little bit frustrating potentially for beginners, but I do think it's beginner friendly because it only uses one type of wire and there's no weaving involved. So if you want to see how to make this pendant, go ahead and keep watching. The wire that I'm using is 20 gauge round copper wire, and I just have this big spool here, but you can also get artistic wire or zebra wire. Those are just a few of the brands that I've used in the past. The artistic one is easy to find in craft stores if you're looking for something you can buy locally, so you don't have to go online. But I buy this online, this big large spool. Since I use lots of wire, I buy it in bulk from riogrande.com, and this is just plain dead soft round copper. And we're gonna need just two pieces for this particular design. This is all we're gonna need, and they're 10 inches long, so two 10-inch pieces. And my stone, I'll measure it for you. It's a teardrop, and it is obsidian, and it measures about 1.25 inches, or in millimeters it is maybe like 32 millimeters. And it's also quite wide here on the top. It's about 20 millimeters wide, or for doing inches, it's a little less than 1 inch wide. So it looks like this, and we're going to be positioning it point down. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is find the middle of my two wires, and I'm going to place that. Let me hold it this way for now so it's easier. I'm going to place my stone where the middle of my wires is. And the key thing here with your teardrop, if you notice, it gets wider, 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 and then this is the widest point here, and then it just kind of gets rounded off and smaller here at the top. So what you want to do is make sure that you have your wire here on a fairly thin part of your teardrop. If you do it too high, your stone might be able to just slide out. To trap in the stone properly, we have to trap it at a skinny bit, like down here. So for me, for this particular teardrop, it's about 3/4 of the way up the teardrop if I'm holding it this way. So I'm placing it there, I'm pressing it down with my fingers, and I'm bending the wire towards the front. So I'm bending one side like this, and then the other side. And the wires, when you bend them, are gonna kind of crisscross a little bit. So let me zoom in. So what makes this tricky is because everything is quite slippery and it's sliding all around, and the stone is not trapped in. So you kind of have to work with your fingers to try and hold everything steady. So this moves from side to side, and I'm trying to get it nice and centered like this, and then I'm pinching it, and then here I'm also holding the stone on the bottom, trying to hold it in this position. So it's a little bit tricky, but the reason I'm doing that is so that my other hand can be free to bend these wires. So I'm taking the one that's on the top and I'm giving it a bit of a curve like this. Then I'm taking this next two set of wires that are on the bottom underneath, and I'm also curving them like this. And then I'm gonna curve this one a little more, curve this one a little more until they meet up. And the key thing is you're trying to get this little, I don't know what to call this, like a swirl. It's not really a swirl though, is it? Like a wave. You're trying to get it to be in the middle of your stone. So if I just kind of press everything down onto my stone here, and I take a look, it's just a smidge over to one side. So what you can do is just try to pull it a little bit more to the other side until it looks nice and centered like this. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take the bottom wires. So now we're gonna hold it like this. This is gonna be the ultimate way that it's positioned when we're done with the pendant. So make sure it's centered because it can still move side to side. So make sure you just kind of like push the stone down in there and make sure that it's centered, and then take not the top wire but the bottom wire and bend it to the back like this, and just go ahead and just push it. I'll show you what that looks like from the back in 1 second after I do this next one. So as you're doing the next one, look at the one that you already did and try to line them up so they're the same. One isn't like much lower or higher. Okay, so I'm bending it to the back, and on the back I'm pressing it down. So let me switch here to the back. These are being pressed down across the back like this. Okay, so at this point, the stone can slide up and down still. So we still have to hold the stone. All right, so I'm gonna push the stone in so it's hasn't slid up, and I'm gonna work on these two wires. So the wire that is on the top, I'm just gonna give it a little curve like this, and then the next wire, I'm gonna give it a similar little curve, and I'm gonna try to get the curves to be symmetrical so that when I'm looking at it straight like this, it looks nice and even. And then if it doesn't, you can either work on the curves with your fingers, or you can come in here with some pliers and try to fix it so that it looks even. All right, so once it looks good, what you want to do is you want to actually press on it with your finger. So with my thumb, I'm pressing on it here because I don't want it to move. If I don't press on it, it might get smaller or larger. I want it to stay the same. So notice which wire is on top and which wire is on bottom. So for me, this wire is on top and this wire is on bottom. And so I want to twist these wires together. And because this one's on bottom, I have to twist like this in this direction. So I'm just going to go ahead and just gently and carefully twist the wires together. What helps, in my opinion, what helps my twists stay nice and even is having these wires be at equal angles. So if one is much lower and one is much straighter, the wire that is less straight ends up wrapping around the other wire instead of getting an even twist. like this. So I always just very slowly and carefully twist just a little bit at a time. This way, if something starts to go wrong, you can always adjust and you haven't gone very far. And here's what it's looking like. So our twist actually needs to be fairly long. So I'm just going to keep going with it, because it's going to be our bail. And if you end up, stopping and yours is not as long as it needs to be, you can always add more to it later. That's totally fine. So I'm going to stop now because I don't want it to be too long. I'll measure it for you, and then you can see how my bail turns out, and you can decide if you want your bail to be the same size or if you want it to be smaller or bigger. So it's about 25 millimeters. Or if I measure in inches, it's about an inch, exactly an inch. All right, so a key thing here is that our stone is pushed down. It's like right up against the wire here on the bottom, and that it's still centered. Okay, so if that's the case, go ahead and bend this twist down this way. Okay, so here's what that looks like now. And now, where the stone ends here on this side, we're going to grab the twist and we're going to bring it straight up like this. So it's kind of going up onto the stone, and then where the stone ends, it's just going straight up. All right, so now we're going to make our bail. So to make my bail, I'm just going to bend it a little bit more forward, and then you can use a tool. You can use something round, like round nose pliers or bail making pliers, or if you want to, which is what I'm doing here, you can just do it manually with your hand, with your finger, with your pliers. But basically we want to make the bail, the little loop. So I'm just going to keep bending that around. And what I'm going to do with these wires, these two wires, is the wire that is underneath the other wire, I'm going to straighten it like this. So it's straight, going straight down. And then the wire here that's on top, I'm going to have it go to the side like that. Okay, it's going to make it a little easier to close up this bail. So now we're just going to bring the twist where the twist is over right here, where I have this wire going. I'm going to try and connect that to right here. Just like this. So this is our bail. And what we're going to do now with this wire, this is the wire coming from the twist. We're going to take it and we're going to wrap it all the way around the bail like this to connect it. And now we're going to keep it on top, so not like this on the bottom. See, it's going underneath the wire. We don't want that. We want it to go on top. It'll just make it easier to tuck it away. So it's going on top of the other wire, and we're bringing it from front to back. So now we have these two wraps, 1, 2, going around the bail. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squish them a little bit with my pliers. And then this wire here, I'm just going to bring it around. Squish it again. So here it is. And the way that I'm going to finish off this wire is I'm going to take my wire cutters here and I'm going to trim it. Let me kind of raise it up a little bit. I'm going to trim it, but I'm going to leave a little wire end so that I can take that little wire end and I can turn it inwards with my pliers and just kind of tuck it into the bail, and then you can kind of see it from here. It's like a little loop, and then you just push on that little wire end and push it in here, and it just kind of closes up that loop and tucks away that wire end. If you cut it too long, it might come all the way through and stick out on the other side, so you might have to just come in here and trim it. But if you cut it the right length, it'll just be long enough to go in here but not come out the other side. So we've hidden the wire end away. You can't feel it, and it's not visible from the front or the back. And our bail is complete. So now we just have to finish off all of these wires here. So the first wire that we're going to work with is this one that's coming straight down from the bail. So it's coming on top of everything else, as you can see here. That's important. You want it to be on top of these two wires. And you want it to come down to this area here. And you want to trim it. So I'm going to trim it like this. It's better if you trim it a little bit too long and you shorten it later than if you trim it too short, because that's going to make it difficult. Okay, so just give yourself a nice little wire end here like this. Better if it's longer than shorter. And what we're going to do is we're going to tuck this underneath these two wires. So that looks pretty difficult to do. So what we're going to have to do first is raise these wires up and away from the stone. So I'm just grabbing them with my pliers and I'm pulling them up and away from the stone. And as you can see, maybe you can see it this way, there's a gap now underneath these two wires that got formed. Hopefully that shows well. And what I'm going to do with this wire, it's a little tricky to get it under here. So what I like to do is I like to just lift it up and put like a little curve in the wire, like this. That's what makes it easier for me, so I don't put any sharp bends into the wire. That'll be hard to get rid of later. And I'm just pushing it. Ooh, it wants to go underneath one of the wires, but not both. I'm just pushing it underneath both of the wires like this, and once it's sticking out the other side, I'm pressing down on this curve and I'm pulling it out the other side, and that way the wire is pretty much still going straight across. We haven't put any major bends or kinks into it. And now I'm just going to go over it with my pliers and just press it down to make sure that it's flat against the stone, like this. And this little wire end, so I'll show you. So let's look at it like this. Make sure it's going just straight down the middle, not to one side or the other side. We're going to take this little wire end and we're going to bend it up like this. So it's a little bit too long, but like I said, better a little longer than too short. So now I'm just going to trim it a little bit, just so that I can take the end of it and turn the end inwards this way. So the end is going towards the stone, and then I'm just going to press down on it like this. So I've essentially just made a little loop wrapped around these two wires like that. And you can press on it a little harder if you want to just tighten it up, but it should be good. Now it's not going to move. So now we're going to finish these two wires. So what you want to do is just, first of all, make sure that this is centered, because it can still move. So mine moves a little bit side to side. So you just really want to make sure it's centered. I'm going to hold kind of here on the edges so that these wires don't move. And I'm going to bend just very kind of slowly and gently. I'm going to bend these up because I don't want to move this central wire. So I'm bending each of these wires up like this. And each of the wires is starting to come around and wrap around this middle wire. Okay, so now we're ready to finish them off. And what I'm going to do is just trim it Trim it short, but leave yourself a little wire end. Try to make the wire end the same on both sides, the same length, so that you can take that little wire end and then just turn it downwards with your pliers and then press on it further so that it basically starts pointing down into the stone. So the wire end is going down into the stone, which means that you won't be able to feel it and it won't be sticking up. And that's how we're going to hide away this wire end also. Just turn it down into the stone and then press on it this way to close up that loop. So one thing that can happen is because these wires, one of the wires has to be below the other wire, right? So they look almost, you know, straight across, but in my case, this one is just a smidge higher. So what you can do, let me kind of turn it this way, so I'm just looking at it the correct way with the bail on top. So now that I'm looking at it this way, this wire is just a smidge lower. And I want them to be exactly the same height. So you can just take your pliers and put a little bend into your wire like this to allow it to be exactly on the same level. Like this is what matters right here, because this is what you're going to see from the front. And you want them to be on the same level here so that these sides match. All right, so it's almost finished. I'm going to show you one last thing that I like to do, and that is to come here on the back, and these two wires here, I'm going to wedge my pliers in between these two wires like this, and then I'm going to bend this wire this way. So if you're holding your pendant upside down like this, it's the top wire out of those bottom two, and then same thing here. Gonna just wedge my pliers in there and put a bend. So I'm just trying to get these bends to be equal and even so that when you look at them from the front, they will be even. Now this has a little bit more of a curve. They are even in the sense that they both end up in the same spot, but this wire just has a little bit more of a curve to it than the other one. So I'm just pressing on it. Same thing with this one. You can probably see better with this one. See, this one's just kind of going straight and this one's just kind of curving, so it looks a little bit uneven. So I'm just gonna straighten this one out, make it nice and even with the other wire. That's much better. And that's it. Now we can flip it the right way around. And let me just grab a little cord necklace. So here it is on a necklace. And this is a completed piece. And here's the back of it. Pretty clean. Clean, even lines. And the last thing that you might want to do if your bail got tilted to any one side at all, just want to adjust it, but mine's looking pretty good there. And that's it. That's the finished pendant. And let me just show you some other pendants that I have made using this method. So I made another one that also has a black obsidian stone. This one is a little skinnier. The teardrop is a little skinnier. And also this wire sits a little higher on the stone comparatively. And then I have this bloodstone. Again, the wire is sitting quite high, but as long as it's still on the skinny part of the teardrop and not up here where it gets wide, it should be fine. So for comparison, here it is on a bigger, wider stone with the wire higher up and the back of it. And last but not least, I tried to do this design on a star-shaped stone, and here's how that turned out. So you can do it on different shapes as well. I obviously had to alter it a little bit. I ended up putting these wires here instead of under here, but I don't think it would have made a difference if I did there. So that's it. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.